Thank you for the opportunity to discuss GAO's work on the National Flood Insurance Program and flood mitigation strategies, including those to address repetitive loss properties. My remarks today are drawn primarily from GAO's body of work on NFIP reform, flood mitigation, and property acquisition in reports we've issued between April 2017 and July 2023. My statement will focus on two main areas: the role of mitigation in addressing NFIP's fiscal exposure from repetitive loss properties, and how targeting mitigation could reduce NFIP's fiscal exposure and address affordability. Repetitive loss properties are NFIP-insured properties that have suffered multiple flood losses of a certain magnitude over a certain period. These properties create significant challenges for the program because they drive a large share of claims and their numbers have increased over time. FEMA administers several mitigation grant programs that can reduce flood risk for NFIP-insured properties. About 77% of property mitigations from 1989 through 2025 were funded by the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. FEMA has primarily mitigated flood risk using acquisitions. That is, a state or local government purchasing land and structures that flooded from willing sellers and demolishing the structure. Congress and FEMA could improve the use of property acquisitions to reduce repetitive loss properties by addressing some key challenges. We identified challenges related to the acquisition process as well as options to improve the process. For example, one major challenge is the length and complexity of the acquisition process. According to FEMA and stakeholders we interviewed, it typically takes 2 to 3 years to plan a project, apply for and receive a grant, and then purchase and demolish high-risk properties. Another challenge is limited state and community capacity. The complex acquisition process is particularly challenging for communities that lack dedicated grant managers or technical staff. And of course, there are financial challenges. The non-federal cost share for an acquisition project, typically 25% of project costs, can deter community and homeowner participation. Given these and other challenges we heard about, GAO identified a set of options to improve property acquisitions and made recommendations to FEMA and to Congress that they determine whether and how to implement one or more of them. FEMA agreed with our recommendations and has implemented some, but not all of them. Turning to the topic of NFIP's fiscal exposure, GAO has reported several times, most recently in 2023, about the unsound nature of the NFIP program because current premium rates do not fully reflect a given property's risk of flooding. As a result, there is a shortfall between the premiums the program collects and the full risk premiums that would need to be collected to keep the program solvent. In 2023, we estimated that 66% of premiums were not at full risk. We calculated that this would result in a total premium shortfall of $26.7 billion by 2037. To address this, we recommended that Congress authorize and fund means-based assistance for NFIP policyholders unable to afford their full risk premiums, rather than limiting how much premiums can increase each year. Among other things, this approach would make the program more transparent and would help address the program shortfall. Targeting mitigation efforts to those properties with the most heavily discounted premiums could also help address NFIP's fiscal exposure. These will disproportionately be repetitive loss properties, as they generally have greater risk and higher full risk premiums. Mitigating these properties would help NFIP achieve actuarial soundness sooner. Moreover, other mitigation activities, such as elevating, floodproofing, or relocating repetitive loss properties, would reduce their risk of flooding and therefore their full risk premium, making those premiums more affordable for homeowners. In conclusion, mitigating flood risk for NFIP-insured properties can provide important benefits. We've made a number of recommendations to FEMA and Congress to improve the property acquisition process. Without addressing mitigation challenges, the number of repetitive loss properties will continue to grow, increasing costs to NFIP policyholders and federal taxpayers. However, mitigation alone will not resolve the program's financial challenges. A more comprehensive approach that incorporates, among other things, reforms to both mitigation processes and the program's premium rates is needed. Chairman Flood, Ranking Member Presley, and members of the subcommittee, this completes my prepared statement. I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have at this time.